I'm Natasha Kirchuk, and thanks for joining us from our studios in Israel. Coming up in today's newscast, the Israeli army believes Syria may have deliberately fired rockets on Israel. A Hamas delegation defies the U.S. and Israel and arrives in Iran. And Israeli supermodel Bar Refaeli has some heartwarming news to share with the world. Stay tuned for the latest news in Israel. Five rockets launched from Syria have just struck Israeli territory. No casualties or damage have been reported, although one of the missiles hit very close to a major residential area. The IDF has retaliated by destroying 3 Syrian missile launchers and is warning that Israel's response will escalate if there are any more attacks. At first, the missiles were believed to have been spillover from the Syrian civil war, but now suspicions are very high that these were deliberate attacks from the Syrian regime. The area the rockets came from is controlled by the Syrian army, and no fighting was going on there at the time. On top of that, the missiles didn't land close to the border at random, but rather deep inside Israeli territory, one right after the other. This is the second exchange of blows in less than a week between Israel and Syria, and tensions have only been getting worse. Just a few days ago, Iran's military head met with Syrian President Assad and announced that Iran would help Syria fight against their so-called enemy, the Zionist regime. Syria has taken to the United Nations over the latest retaliation, accusing Israel of faking Syria's attack to justify the counter-strike. In an official letter to the UN, Syria is skirting all blame for the 5 missiles and even alleges that Israel actually asked other terror organizations to fire the rockets at the country so that the Jewish state could attack back. The IDF has already confirmed that the missiles were launched from Syria and clearly will not tolerate any aggression against the state of Israel. For those hopeful that the Palestinian reconciliation might ease tensions against Israel or promote peace, Hamas has some bad news for you. Hamas's leader in Gaza has just announced that, quote, the time Hamas spent discussing recognizing Israel is over. Now Hamas will discuss when we will wipe Israel out. ILTV's Aaron Porras is here with more on the story. Now, Aaron, in what ways is this surprising?
Well, that's just it. Unfortunately, this isn't very surprising at all. Officials from Israel and all over the world, really, all across the world, have stated many times that it's very unlikely that Hamas will do anything to change its ways, on a fundamental level, and will likely, in all likelihood, look to retain its military forces, which is no small feat. It's about 25,000 militants.
It's a huge number. Now, why then is this news if Israel already expected that?
So, for a few different reasons. First, because it's still very much unclear whether or not Hamas will keep its military in the end of these negotiation talks. Second, assuming that they do keep their military, just for the sake of argument, it's unclear to whom that military will be accountable to. Will it be like Hezbollah, an independent military force, or will it be accountable to the Palestinian Authority? And if it is, is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? We don't know. And third, which is arguably most important in this specific case, against the protestations of, again, Israel and the United States, Hamas leaders are now in Iran looking to create a deepened connection to Iranian forces in Syria, in Lebanon, and elsewhere, and looking to get some more support. So
Israel has a lot of reasons to be worried right now. We have a lot of reasons to be worried
about this, but yeah, I'll tell you more in the report right now.
These are obviously far from the words Israel has been hoping to hear, though they're not entirely unexpected. That's because both Israel and the United States have demanded that they'll only recognize a Palestinian unity government that fully disarms Hamas and recognizes Israel's right to exist. But giving up its massive army, the largest armed Palestinian force in the world, is something Hamas clearly refuses to do. Case in point, breaking another red line of the United States' demands, Hamas has just sent a team to Iran, hoping to strengthen ties. Many believe Iran will also help connect Hamas to Hezbollah as well as Syria, uniting against the common enemy of Israel. Despite these violations, an anonymous White House official remains strangely optimistic that the Palestinian unity deal might still prove fruitful for Israel. Though the official stresses that dismantling Hamas's army and renouncing violence remains a key requirement, the new opportunity in Gaza would help both parties, quote, if we can make something out of it, end quote. But with Hamas in Iran and its leader intent on annihilating the Jewish state, it remains to be seen if this will truly be a path to peace.
Israel has just appointed a new chief negotiator. Shin Bet veteran Yaron Blum will now be leading Israel's negotiations to reclaim the bodies of 2 fallen IDF soldiers as well as 3 civilians that are believed to still be alive. They're all currently being held by Hamas in the Gaza Strip. IDF soldiers Oron Shaul and Hadar Goldin were killed in the line of duty during 2014's Operation Protective Edge in Gaza, where their bodies have remained in the hands of Hamas ever since. 3 Israeli citizens who crossed into the Strip voluntarily are also believed to be alive in Gaza at this time as well. Israel's previous chief negotiator hit a wall in negotiations and resigned from his post nearly 2 months ago, igniting protests from the victims' families to pursue a new one. Now, Prime Minister Netanyahu has found his man and appointed Yaron Blum to lead the charge. During his time in the Shin Bet, Blum played a critical role in arranging the controversial deal that swapped Israeli prisoner Gilad Shalit in exchange for over 1,000 Palestinian prisoners. Israel's Defense Minister Avigdor Lieberman has been very clear that Israel should not repeat what he believes was that mistake, considering a huge number of those freed prisoners resumed acts of terror after they were let out. Netanyahu may have appointed Blum at a critical time in the negotiations because Hamas has actually accepted conditions for a deal set forth by Egypt. Those conditions require a series of swaps, including freeing Palestinian prisoners and releasing Palestinian bodies before actual negotiations even begin. Israel has yet to respond to this deal, but regardless, Blum already has his work cut out for him. The World Festival of Youth and Students held its annual event in Sochi this year to promote global solidarity for democracy and against war and imperialism. But instead of coming together in the event held by the UN-affiliated NGO, anti-Israel protesters and even other delegations made sure Israel couldn't participate, burning flags and chanting death to the Jews. Well, joining me in the studio now to tell us more about the event is David Shayan, a political activist and the chairman of the Young Likud. Thank you so much for coming in.
Okay.
So what happened and how did it happen? Tell us the story.
Well, it starts a few weeks ago when Young Likud, we had some friends wanted to participate in the conference in Sochi, and then we didn't hear nothing from the embassy, the Russian embassy here in Israel for weeks. And when we wanted to understand what is going on and why we don't get the approved to participate, we got very confused answers. And in the end, they only approved one representative to participate there.
And were you able to figure out why? Did they tell you why that was the case?
We understood that there is a lot of pressure on the Russians not to let the Israeli delegation to participate in.
And why was that?
Because there were a few Arab countries that tried to block and to interrupt the Israelis to participate in the conference. They didn't want us there. In the end, the Israeli delegation participated there, but we have only one representative of the Likud. They give us the answer that there's only one for each organization, but in the end we heard that there are organizations from Israel and from other countries that have more than one representative.
So it had to do specifically with the Likud group. That was the issue here.
That's the impression that we got, but in the end we didn't say a lot. But when we saw the pictures coming from Sochi, the demonstrations and the rumors of violent events there, then we decided that we won't be quiet and we will say what we have to say to the embassy here in Russia, and we sent a letter to the embassy and to the Prime Minister saying that we won't keep it quiet when political activities from Arab nations and countries coming and trying to hurt the Israelis. We won't be quiet when they try to
keep you out, essentially. So here's my question for you. Were there any other Israeli groups at the event?
There is an Israeli group in the event. There are about 50 people there. coming from Israel. They have a lot of difficulties there, but in the same time, they're doing their work. And from the things we're hearing, they representing Israel in very good
So
shape.
what was the response of the Russian government to this? I mean, we just had the defense minister here not long ago, and there seemed to be kind of positive moves towards collaborating when it comes to security measures. But in this case, did the Russian government have a response?
I must say that the friends from the embassy here in Israel, they try to help us. But in the end, if you see the result, as I said, the events there are not so positive. And till now, we sent the letter, and till now we didn't get an answer from the Russians. But I hope they will learn from the mistakes that have been made there, and will fix it to the next time.
I guess that's, you know, what we can only hope. Thank you so much for joining us and telling us this story. All right, 16 Egyptian police officers have just been killed in a surprise shootout outside of Cairo. So far, no group has claimed responsibility, but Egypt had reportedly sent the officers to the area after learning of a terrorist training camp not too far from Cairo. Israel is now condemning the deadly terror attack and is calling on all countries to unite to prevent future terror. Egypt has been combating terror insurgents, including ISIS, for years now, but usually attacks like these are contained to the Sinai Peninsula. That's why the Egyptian ministry was quick to deploy police after learning of armed militants hiding out less than 125 miles southwest of Cairo, just off of a major road. When officers approached, they were quickly met with gunfire and a deadly shootout began, resulting in 16 Egyptian casualties. Unconfirmed reports suggest that the militants used rockets in their attack. Egypt has also confirmed that 15 enemy militants were killed in the clashes and is currently hunting for additional suspects that escaped. Israel has strongly condemned the violence against Egypt, calling it a severe terrorist attack, and is sending condolences to the Egyptian people. A statement from Prime Minister Netanyahu's office reads, "There is no difference between the terrorism that strikes in Egypt and the terrorism that strikes in other countries." At least 50 Israelis have been arrested on suspicion of joining and even fighting for the Islamic State over the last few years. And now, an Israeli court has just given its harshest verdict yet in the sentencing of a man who was convicted of joining the Islamic State along with his wife and 3 small children. With us now is ILTV's Brett Allen Smith. Now, Brett, first of all, this sounds absolutely crazy. What is the story here?
So, Wissam Zabidat is an Israeli citizen from the Arab village of Sakhnin. He has a wife, an 8-year-old son, and 2 daughters. They're 6 and 4. It's a typical family so far, but here's where things get a little wonky. A few years ago, after seeing some internet videos, the entire family crossed over into Syria and enlisted in the Islamic State. Zabidat actually fought as a full-trained soldier for ISIS, but after getting injured in battle, decided to head back to Israel. They were arrested as soon as they landed in Turkey and successfully prosecuted by the state of Israel just earlier this year.
Well, and I remember his trial last year was a big one. He actually confessed in court to joining ISIS.
Right.
Now, what has the judge decided as far as sentencing?
Well, this is actually the biggest sentence ever for an Israeli convicted of joining the Islamic State, nearly 6 years in jail. His wife was just convicted a few months ago as well. She's now serving 4 years under similar charges. So obviously the state isn't taking these charges lightly, as you'll see now in the report. Since the rise of the Islamic State, Israel has seen nearly 60 citizens manage to smuggle themselves out of the country and into Syria to join the terror group. This is exactly what Wissam Zabidat did back in 2015, bringing his wife and 3 young children with him to enlist the whole family in the Islamic State. Zabidat received extensive combat training, served as a guard, and then finally as a combat fighter against Iraqi troops, ultimately injuring his leg in battle. The situation for the family apparently soured at some point because, as Zabidat would later confess in trial, the family decided to head back home to Israel sometime last year. After being arrested in Turkey and then expedited to Israel, Zabidat has now just been given nearly 6 years in prison for his crimes. That's the harshest sentence ever in an Israeli court for an Israeli joining the Islamic State. Zabidat's wife was recently convicted to 4 years under similar charges, making the whole family a prime example of state consequences for enlisting in terror.
All right, now get this. Israeli scientists are behind not one, but two huge new developments in the fight against cancer. An Israeli company has just isolated the genetic mutation that causes colon cancer. And on top of that, a new drug from an Israeli company may be the life-saving solution to lymphoma. The drug is called Yescarta, and it was created by the Israeli-founded Kite Pharma, the second ever drug of its kind to get approval as a gene therapy treatment. Gene therapy is an experimental procedure that injects or alters genes in a patient to fight a disease instead of surgery. Yescarta works by injecting a new gene into infection-fighting T cells that are custom designed from the patient's own DNA. This revolutionary treatment has a 51% remission rate for lymphoma, a huge improvement over pre-existing procedures against the deadly cancer. Meanwhile, Israel's NR has just announced another breakthrough that the gene mutation believed to cause colon cancer has been successfully identified. The company mapped a number of food genomes just a few months ago, but this is actually the first time they've ever used their software on human DNA. NR is now hoping to predict other genetic diseases as well, including food allergies and other cancers, which means that if early detection improves, maybe prevention isn't too far off. Oh, the age of the internet, a time when we become so inundated with information we don't know what to believe anymore. Well, now an Israeli company is on a mission to put an end to biased news. And joining us is Daniel Ravner, the CEO and founder of The Perspective. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So tell us, what is The Perspective and why did you come up with it?
The Perspective is a website that's on a mission to open people's minds. It always shows you two sides of every story, be it current events, be it big debates like abortion, like gun control, like paleo diet, and be it historic timelines. So for example, one of the things that we do, we really take on psychology and design in order to circumvent people's rejection, because people usually don't really get persuaded through an argument.
Well, right, and they want to read what they agree with anyhow. That's one of the common issues. Okay.
So we use different, I don't want to say tricks, but we use different means in order to allow people to be more comfortable opening their minds. So for example, in one of our features, which is called Subjective Timeline, we tackle historic debates like the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And when you go on your mobile phone, you will see the same key events going on, and then you can swipe left and right to see how each side sees the same event, because history is really subjective. So everybody has the side that they're comfortable with, alongside the side that might challenge them. But even that, we recognize that there are different values that are important to people who are liberal or conservative. Right. And we use conservative values to frame liberal arguments, and we use liberal values to frame conservative arguments.
Very interesting. Okay, so this is almost like mind-boggling. I'm trying to put this together as we go. And so what are you using articles from other news sources and then changing those articles through this method?
It depends. We have different content features. So one of them would be aggregation. We would find, because on Facebook you wouldn't see stuff that really challenges you, right? You would see stuff that people who are exactly like you share.
Right, because you follow what you like.
Yeah. So we wouldn't be even exposed to stuff that is different, even if it's stuff that is worth your while and is interesting. So on the aggregation feature, we find stuff that is worth your time, that is interesting, and we put it one next to the other. On the pro-con articles, we really research it ourselves, but write it in a way that would appeal to your values.
Now here's my question. When it comes to facts, this interesting word that we use, is there a level of fact-checking that's going on? Because part of what you're saying here is that there is no one history, right? People see it from a different perspective.
Well, I have two answers to that. The first one is, yes, obviously, because we're running through the news every day, we have a team of writers that kind of look into 15, 20 articles per story. So I think what's false and what's real kind of jumps up at you. But I don't, it's a different subject, but
right, this is something that we can go...
It's an interesting one, but I don't think fake news is as big of a problem as filter bubbles. Because people have always been, there were always been extreme people who lied. And what changed is the fact that they have a platform in which to reverberate. And that's what makes the difference. In a world with zero fake news and the same kind of filter bubbles, you would have the same exact polarization.
So here's my question for you. Have you launched yet? If so, how many people are currently using this platform? And if not, when can we access it?
No, it's actually, we've launched it on Product Hunt on March 17.
Okay.
And we had a wonderful launch. We've been around for 7-8 months. We've been growing 20-30% each month. And we've won the 2017 Web Award for Best News Site 7 months after we launched. So we feel like, we're at the point where we have to prove potential, and we think we are on a good path, yeah.
Absolutely. Well, this is very interesting. I'm going to check it out myself.
Yes, please do.
And thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
20 years ago, Israeli archaeologists stumbled across one of the world's most complete and detailed ancient mosaics in the city of Lod. The famous Lod mosaic has been on international display in museums like the Metropolitan Museum of Art in the Louvre, but now Israelis will finally be able to see it here at home, right where it was found. At a whopping 17 meters in length, the Lod mosaic's colorful designs and detailed descriptions of ancient mammals, birds, fish, and sailing vessels make it truly one of a kind. Discovered in near-perfect preservation, it was found completely by accident during a dig in the central Israeli city of Lod. Experts have dated the mosaic back to the end of the 3rd century, around the time of the Romans, and believe it was the floor of a living room villa in an expensive housing complex. The design is also a rarity for its time because it features no human figures and is clearly influenced by North African mosaics. The Lod mosaic has toured some of the world's most elite museums, including the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York and the Louvre in France. But 20 years after its discovery, Israelis will finally be able to see the mosaic themselves. Construction has just started on the Shelby White and Leon Levy Lod Mosaic Archaeological Center, which will return the mosaic to its original home in Lod, where it will remain on permanent display. As if we don't see or hear enough about the stunning supermodel Bar Refaeli, it looks like she has some more news for us. The Israeli star has finally given birth to her second baby girl, and ILTV's Emmanuel Kadosh is here with the details. Emmanuel?
Hi, Natasha. Well, like you said, it's pretty hard to miss the blue-eyed Bar Refaeli, especially living here in Israel. She's only on every billboard, commercial, and magazine in the Holy Land, and is one of the biggest Israeli celebrities worldwide. We here on ILTV wanted to send a huge congratulations to her and her husband Adi Ezra on their second baby, who they named El. Bar Refaeli gave birth to her first child, Liv, back in August of last year, and wasted no time getting pregnant with the second. I guess she got a little sick of her super toned model bod and was ready to have some gorgeous little girls who will hopefully grace the covers of thousands of magazines worldwide, just like their mom.
Well, we can only hope that her two little baby girls come out with their mom and dad's fierce blue eyes, right? So how is Bar feeling after the pregnancy? Does she have any new work coming up?
I mean, after 9 months, I think any mother would be excited to be blessed with a new baby and a less bloated stomach. But Bar Refaeli was actually most excited about food. The supermodel, who is also the host of Israel's The X Factor and will reportedly be the host of the Israeli Big Brother show, was back to her pre-pregnancy habits and posted a photo over the weekend with a huge tray filled with sushi. Refaeli captioned it, waited 9 months for this. Fair enough. I would have ordered much more than one tray.
Good for her and for her self-control. It'll be interesting to see if she's going to have a third child down the line. I think we all want to know what a baby boy Bar would look like.
Definitely.
She does have a lot of work to focus on, though. Thanks, Emmanuel, for joining us and telling us all about this. And Mazal Tov to Bar and her family.
Yes.
Enroll in eTeacher's online Hebrew courses and quickly discover that it creates the deepest connection to Israel that you could ever imagine.
And now for our Hebrew word of the day. Israeli supermodel Bar Refaeli has just given birth to her second baby, meaning her first daughter now has a little sister. Now, there's nothing like a sibling to make your childhood a memorable one, so today's word is achim, which means siblings in Hebrew. Now, it's hard to imagine what my life would be like without my sister Lulu, who would be there to annoy me, occasionally attempt to beat me up, and of course watch stupid TV shows by my side. What can I say? Achim, you love them and you hate them. But there are few bonds that are stronger than the ones we have with our Achim, so never take them for granted. On that note, Lulu, I love you, but stop stealing my clothes. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at the weather forecast. Tonight will be clear to partly cloudy with a low of 64 or 18 degrees Celsius. Tomorrow is expected to remain clear to partly cloudy with a slight drop in temperatures, and with a high of 79 or 26 degrees Celsius. All right, that's it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.49 shekels to the American dollar. Remember to sign up for our daily newsletter at iltv.tv. I'm Natasha Kirchak, and thanks for watching.